Welcome, everybody. My name is Scott Levine. I'm an attorney and a venture investor. I do work with mostly early stage companies, yet today we're here to talk about how to scale your business without outside capital. We're here on behalf of an organization that we're all members of, and we all volunteer on the board. It's called Entrepreneurs Organization. EO is the largest nonprofit peer organization in the world, 17,000 members worldwide. St. Louis has one of the oldest and largest and most influential chapters in the world. EO has two programs. One is for companies above $1 million, and one is for companies between $250,000 and $1 million in revenue. The organization's led by its members. We have one staff person and a $600,000 budget. So we're all we like to evangelize for this organization because it's meant so much for us. When I was talking to one of the organizers of the event about what topic we could bring to this experience, when you think startup, you think early stage, you think raising capital. Well, EO is an organization of peers who are committed to helping each other learn and grow. And most of us, with few exceptions inside of EO, at least in St. Louis, everyone has scaled their business or is scaling their business without outside capital. And we gave that some thought and said, well, maybe this is something we could bring to this experience. One, because raising capital is very difficult. Capital is often scarce when you need it. And we truly believe that that we can share our experience here. So one of the things that, the rules inside of EO is that we don't share any opinions. We literally are trained to just share our experience. And it's a different way of engaging with others. But it's also proven very effective in terms of when I'm sharing my experience, you're more likely to listen than when I'm telling you what to do, when I really don't know what you should do. It's very hard to know what someone else should do. So today, I've got three of my colleagues, friends, board members, who John and Michael run our accelerator program here in St. Louis. There's about 30 entrepreneurs in the program right now. Our goal is we have a pretty ambitious goal to grow it. And so I'm going to let them introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll share some of our experience and then have some time for questions. David?
My name's, is this working? Yeah, you got into it. I got to talk into it. Okay, thanks, Michael. They say you don't share advice, but he just did, so shame on you, Michael. David Singer with Warehouse of Fixtures. I started the company 18 years ago, although the company has a much longer history in St. Louis. We sell new, used, and refurbished office furniture, and started from zero with zero capital. So.
Hello, I am John Covey. I run 3 different businesses. My first business, which qualified me for EO, is called Genius Games. We publish science-accurate board games. I started that about 10 years ago, acquired a competing brand in 2019, and then I got the itch to be in acquisitions. I opened up a company called Simple Financials. We do outsourced bookkeeping, monthly bookkeeping, bookkeeping cleanup for clients who want to sell or just want to run their company better in light CFO services. And then recently, I bought another company called Transworld Business Advisors. It's a business brokerage. So we help people buy companies. We help people sell their businesses when they're ready to exit, bolt on a company to their current business. That's basically what I do. I've been in EO. I started out as an accelerator. Now Michael and I are running the accelerator program, and I've been in for about 4 years.
Oh, I got one. My name is Mike Lickertz. I have owned several medical clinics in the past. Most recently, I started a weight loss clinic called the St. Louis Weight Loss Secret. We help people lose weight, especially come after COVID when everyone gained a bunch of weight. I, like David, started with basically $0 and scaled the business quite quickly. I think that's it.
Again, I'm Scott Levine. My law firm is Aegis Law. It's a venture-focused law firm I started about 20 years ago and have been scaling it for the last 5 years through acquisitions around the country. I also started a venture fund, a local venture fund called iSelect Fund, and about 9 years ago. and that's still cranking. So, when we were reflecting last night, we were thinking, well, what is capital, right? Well, capital gives you leverage, right? You could buy time with it, you could buy employees with it, you can buy other resources, technology, things that we all think we need. Obviously, for some companies it's essential, but it's at different points in our growth, wouldn't it be nice to have more money in the bank to leverage? We've all experienced that. In fact, I was thinking about, you guys were talking about scaling. There have been times when it's just the opposite. We're choking, right? There's just no money to pay people and buy things and grow the business, and we had to figure out a way of moving through that. So I guess I asked each of you to reflect on that in your own businesses, that point in time or a point in time to share, I'm sure there are many, when you were able to leverage something other than outside capital to either successfully or unsuccessfully, we can learn from both, that you could share with us. David.
So when I started my business, my dad said you have to have a good relationship with a local bank. And at the time, no one would lend me any money, but my family had had a relationship with a bank, so I started banking with them, meeting with them, talking with them. He said, one thing you don't want to do is only call your bank when you need something. So we started with Enterprise Bank. We were a very cash positive business because we were almost all cash and carry. So we started, another thing they said is get your line of credit when you don't need it, because when you do need it, no one's going to want to lend you money. So we opened up a line of credit with our bank, and as we grew, we started to do more outside sales, which tend to be net 30, net 60. And we leveraged our terms with our clients, but that wasn't enough because a lot of the larger companies are professionals and not paying you on time. They're very, very, very good at it, and your vendors tend to cut you off if you don't pay them on time, although having hard conversations is useful. So one time where my banking relationship really helped me was when COVID hit. So it became pretty clear to me when COVID hit that an office furniture business was not going to thrive in an environment where no one was going into the office. So I made 2 calls, one to my business advisor, and the second call was to my bank. And I said, look, these are the steps that I'm taking to right-size my business for what I see coming. This is how long I think it's going to take me to do that. And what I need you to do is open up our whole line of credit. And I need to know from you that if I don't draw down my line, because a lot of people, when they see that kind of environment, what they're going to do is they're going to draw down their entire line of credit so that they have the capital available to them in case their line gets called. I said, I want to know from you, who's making the credit decision, that if I don't draw down my line, you're not going to pull it. And they opened up my whole line of credit, which was another $1 million. And it allowed me some space to breathe and think about how to reposition ourselves for a new environment. And then the government came in and gave us a bunch of money, so it turned out we didn't even need it.
Just on David's remarks, when we're talking about outside capital, we mean equity capital, oftentimes. There's a difference, obviously, in giving up equity, spending all your time hunting for equity, and leveraging debt, more traditional forms of leverage.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell a story about how we were able to leverage our internal cash by changing our business model. And EO specifically was instrumental in this process. So in the board game industry, let me give you some quick context. So we're paying salaries for all of our staff. We're paying developers, we're paying artists, right? We're pumping out all this cash to create a design. Then we send the files to the factory, and that manufacturer is going to take 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, however long it takes to produce that game, and maybe 3,000 to 10,000 units at a time. Then it's going to spend 6 weeks to 12 weeks on a boat coming back from China to the US. It's going to sit in our warehouse. We'll take some orders. Those orders are going to be on net 60, maybe net 30 at best. So the picture I'm trying to paint here is we're putting a lot of our cash up front to produce this product, to get it into a warehouse that we can actually sell. And this was just eating us alive. And we would sell to distributors that wanted 60% off because they're going to sell to retailers at 50% off, and they're going to sell to the end customer, right? Target, Walmart, wherever, Barnes & Noble. They're buying it at 50% off from these distributors. So we don't actually see cash for many, many, many months. And we're cash poor. We're drying up. And I'm asking outside investors for money, and I'm launching Kickstarter campaigns. And if it wasn't for Kickstarter, I wouldn't even be sitting here. I've raised about $3 million through Kickstarter, through about 17 campaigns, launching products like this. And what we ended up doing is Amazon at that point was, maybe 5 to 10% of our sales. And we knew direct-to-consumer like that was going to be where we needed to transition. But there was a ton of distributors and retailers out there on Amazon selling our products at low prices. So we made a decision to cut out all the distributors, go direct to the consumer, and that meant we basically just sat on losing $50,000 a month, $40,000 a month, $20,000 a month. The losses got lower and lower and lower. The point is, there are 2 points. One, how do you leverage your internal cash, decrease the time of your cash cycles, right? Go from net 60 to net 30, go from net 30 to net 15, to due on receipt, to I need a deposit before I'm going to do any services or work for you. That was a very difficult time in my company. And if it was not for EO and my group of peer entrepreneurs, I probably would have never made that decision. I needed that support. And I'm not talking financial support. I mean, I needed that emotional support, right? From my peer group to be able to help me walk through that time where we're just losing gobs and gobs of money, believing that it's going to be better in 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, whatever.
Do you mind if I add something? Sure. Yeah, along those lines, one of the things that he said was really important, and that was managing your DSO and your DPO. One of the things you learn when you go through some of the financial things in Accelerator, your days payable outstanding, how long it takes you to pay your vendors, and your days sales outstanding, how long it takes for you to get paid. So if you can extend your payables and decrease your receivables, your days sales outstanding, you have better cash flow. It's pretty simple when you think of it like that.
I have a very different situation than Mr. Singer because I couldn't get any bank to talk to me. When I graduated with a degree in chiropractic, and I had accumulated some credit card debt in school. And after some bad legal advice, their advice was to file bankruptcy. Now, when you do that, you can't get a credit card. No bank will even talk to you for at least 7, probably 10 years. When it was all said and done, I had $2.38 in my bank account. At the time, gas was $2.83. I couldn't even get a gallon of gas. So not only did I not have any money, I couldn't get any money. So it causes and forces you to get creative. It causes and forces you to get scrappy. So for me, I knew that I had the ability to chat and talk to people. So I walked down the street to Starbucks, and I sat down, and I started making calls to people that I knew. And I just said, come meet me for coffee. And who do you know? Who do you know that needs a chiropractor? Who do you know that's been in a car accident? What lawyers do you know? What medical doctors do you know that can refer me business, et cetera? So sometimes not having money, not able to get the capital that you need, forces you to take actions. So my advice and my point of my story is sometimes not getting money is some of the best things that can happen to you in your companies.
I can share a little bit about my story. So I for the first portion of my career, I was just a traditional lawyer working in a traditional law firm. About 8 years ago, I joined this organization. I'm surrounded by entrepreneurs, and I was more of a lawyer who needed to have a business in order to have a law practice. I really didn't consider myself an entrepreneur, but there was something about the organization I was convinced to join. And I sat in meetings for a year with all these, not these guys, but similar looking people, And they were all talking about their strategies and their goals and where they're headed. And I'm like, get clients, find lawyers to service the clients, repeat. Like that's really how I had grown my business. And I started thinking, well, what business could I scale? What could I grow? Because I clearly can't scale a business that's dependent upon me, and my ability to find clients. And I began to consider, we had built a non-traditional law firm, even though it was really revolving around me and my clients. We had, I don't know, 6 or 7 attorneys working for me. And I decided to say, well, could I begin to attract lawyers in the second half of their career? Could I acquire them? Instead of, finding 100 clients to pay me, $10,000, why not find one lawyer who had 100 clients? And a light bulb went off, and I didn't have any capital, so I wasn't going to write a check for a law firm in Florida, and I kind of used my passion, my vision, my experience, and a little bit of leveraging the people that were already having a successful experience at my firm, and I began to convince people to join the firm without paying them anything, and they were guaranteeing their revenue. And did it once, and I began to leverage the success we were having because these lawyers were joining us. We shifted our mission to sort of attracting and retaining and making happy lawyers who are mostly miserable people. Right? If I said, raise your hand if you know a miserable attorney, I could fill my pipeline. So my point is that people started coming to the firm having a good experience, and I began shifting my attention away from being a lawyer to being an entrepreneur, recognizing that I couldn't do both really well. And, I don't know, 7 years later, when I joined EO, I was doing $1 million a year. Now we're doing well over that every month. And lawyers, we're very picky. Not that we weren't picky, but if you're not a good culture fit and you're not checking all the boxes, we're not interested. The pandemic did not hurt. Lawyers in the second half of their career realizing that they don't need the overhead of the environments that they're working in or the headaches of partnership, traditional partnership. We have a non-equity model. It's the other thing. I was convincing these lawyers to come over and work for the firm without taking any equity. So what did it take to do that, in my opinion? A fair amount of chutzpah, right? Leave a partnership, convincing them that owning and operating a business was dilutive to their success and happiness, and then getting outside of St. Louis. The idea that we could do this in other cities was a fantasy until we did it, and now we're in Denver, Chicago, Detroit, and we're limited now by other concerns, like I don't know how to manage a business. I'm not really good at turn off the camera. I'm not really good at managing a business of this size, and I certainly can't manage one that's twice this size. Where we tried it, so now we're having other challenges, but leveraging chutzpah, leveraging a little bit of charisma, and respect that you can earn by treating people the right way, and trust, and none of those required any outside capital. Yes.
So when you were, bringing people in with that kind of no equity proposition, did you lay out a financial path for them? Was there, that's typically the conversation with the, well, I've got this partnership I can buy in, I'm already a part owner, I've got this long-term plan where I can retire because of that component.
Yeah.
I guess, do you replace that and say, well, hey, dollar for dollar, we're better off?
There is an adage, you probably heard it if you're ever trying to raise capital or growing a tech business, go ugly early, right? Create something and convince someone that other people will buy this. I kind of went ugly early, and that was the chutzpah part. I convinced people that I had a vision. It was just one person, truthfully, and she came in with call it a $500,000 book of business, and now she's at $3.5 million. That story sells itself. So what I was telling, and then of course picking your target market, I'm picking lawyers in the second half of their career, been there, done that people. They understand that owning a business and being in a partnership is a horrible experience, many of them do, because you can't be great at both. You can't be a great technician and a great entrepreneur. At some point you got to pick a path if your business will let you. And so the succession plan, no one has a succession plan in my profession. You know, so I was able to sort of lay out, well, you know, we have an economic model that will allow you to slow down, other people can pick up the slack and you can continue to get paid. You know, I didn't have a plan for this, and every one of the things I just said was like, oh, I had to learn that from this person and this experience, but we're kind of at that place right now where it's a pretty easy conversation, you know, where I can show you, well, just layer your financials over our model, just change business cards and you'll make more money, if that's your priority, before you start leveraging everything that we can bring to you. So, yeah. So I used to say that, and it was bullshit. Now I can say it with confidence and point to half a dozen people. So.
Scott, are you saying that sometimes lawyers don't tell the truth?
No, I'm not saying that. Sometimes our clients don't tell the truth, and we have to support them.
So what Scott said actually brought something up to me. We heard Bob Chapman. He spoke to us as a small group, and we got to meet and talk to
Who's
him.
he?
What's that?
Not everyone knows who Bob.
Bob Chapman runs Berry Way Miller, which they roll up a bunch of manufacturing companies that manufacture products for manufacturing companies. They're one of the biggest private companies in St. Louis, a very successful firm. And he told a story about how they were out of cash. And he told his CFO, we got to go buy businesses. And that made something click in my head. I was like, well, if I don't need any cash to go buy businesses, maybe that's something I should do. So we actually ended up buying a $2 million building in the city of St. Louis with no money down, and a $4 million competitor of ours with no money down, and then a $1 million competitor of ours with almost nothing down. If you can get creative, sell the story, and look for financing in different places, you know what Michael said about not having money, you really can leverage your connections and a little bit of know-how to make things happen without having the cash.
Just look at the FTX story.
Oh, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
Curious, your opinions on things like PayPal Capital, Shopify loans, things like that.
Here's two. Go ahead if anyone has. I have a thought on that. I'm sure. You know, debt's an interesting thing. There's an emotional part to debt, right? Someone once told me what an entrepreneur knows about his or her business that he or she can't articulate and share with others is what helps them sleep at night and make their decisions, right? So taking on debt without mentorship, without wisdom, without peers is foolish. But if you feel like you can rationalize that experience, because if it's expensive debt, you know, at that level, it's really based on your credit anyway. As someone who's taken on a lot of debt and paid most of it back, you know, sometimes it's like, what was I thinking? But then you get through it, you pay it down, and you know. So I don't have a strong opinion of it, but outside of the context of your choices, but yeah.
I've got an opinion on it. I would not do it. And I'd almost say, this is strong, I would never do it. Not that I would never take debt. I've got a lot of debt to run my business. If your primary channels to run your company are Amazon, Square, Stripe, PayPal, whatever, and you need those channels to run your company, don't get in bed with them on debt. That's a dangerous thing. We had an event that happened with Stripe where we had launched a Kickstarter campaign. We had about $400,000 coming our way. And I had borrowed money from friends and family to get us to this point, and I needed that money. And Stripe somehow thought that our account was fraudulent. They sent me an email and said, hey, we're very sorry, but your account is high risk. We are not going to be charging those credit cards, and you'll be receiving no money. And I literally almost had a panic attack. I went home to my wife, crying my eyes out, thinking, our lives are over. We're filing bankruptcy. I can't pay your dad back. I can't pay my friends back. What am I going to do? It ended up being a complete mistake on Stripe's part. Complete mistake. How? I have no idea. Through my EO connections, I was able to find someone in the executive level at Stripe that actually looked at it and said, whoa, no, that's not right at all. And I received that money. And the point is, I depend on Stripe. I depend on PayPal. I depend on Amazon. And Amazon's like, hey, do you want $20,000? No. Because if I can't pay that back, I'd literally rather tell my friend I can't pay you back right now, not my primary sales channel. Because they can just shut my account down or take the money however they want, right?
Good point. Mike, you shared your I can't buy gas story, but you didn't share why you're sitting in that chair. Could you share a little
Because
bit?
I scaled the business to $1 million?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's literally what happened. When you don't have any money, you really have to work your butt off. And it's 70, 80-hour weeks. It's a lot of phone calls. It's working really hard. I did take a predatory loan, because when you have a bankruptcy on your report, you got to take aggressive loans. I was able to pay it back, paid back a lot of money, and didn't borrow that much money. But it helped me grow the business to a point where I could qualify for EO, and that was actually a goal. I met somebody in a bigger organization called YPO, and he told me that the number one thing that helped him in his business and growing it was joining EO. And I said, well, what do you got to do? And you got to be at $1 million a year. I was at, I think, $800,000 a year. And I said, I built my practice networking, going to luncheons, going to networking events, and most of them are free, which means you hang out with a bunch of multi-level marketing companies, and I hated those companies, and I didn't want anything to do with that. But it gave me a goal to get to $1 million and then surround myself with other people that are making $1 million or more and leverage their networks who are much more qualified than people trying to create a downline. And all the real estate agents and mortgage brokers and insurance salesmen, and so it creates a better network of people. And then, like, we've all got stories where we've leveraged our network. Who do you know that's a high level in Stripe? Who do you know that's owner of a bank or whatever that you can actually speak to and have a good warm introduction for?
Has anyone in the room ever had a mentor? Just right, show of hands. Was it a meaningful experience?
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever heard anyone say, well, that was a shitty waste of time, that the CEO of that company, of a multi-billion-dollar company gave me, 20 hours of his time this year? Well, I will say that, keep going back to this point of risk assessment. One of the things we don't know when we're running a young company or when we're inexperienced for whatever reason in what we're doing is how to quantify the risk. We don't have the wisdom, right? And I know that now that I'm more than halfway through my life, hopefully, not too far, but middle of my life, I know that when I'm sitting with someone, I'm about to hip check them down a path that they're not thinking, they don't have the experience. They just haven't seen what I've seen. They're sharing a story. And I would just sort of, in a sort of suggestion category, is have a learner's mind when you're around other people that are not more successful necessarily, but more experienced. It's so hard not to focus on your own success and what you're building and your ambition and all the things that go into the choice to leave a job or whatever you did to start your business, take money from friends and family. When someone, a mentor or someone with more experience is looking you straight in the eye and saying, might I suggest this path? I know for myself, those have been the moments that have been the most impactful for me.
Hey, Scott, I have actually a few mentors. One of them, Mike Steinberg, runs a very large real estate company. Another, Doug Shukar, who actually suggested that I join EO to begin with, runs a very large mortgage company, and both of those guys grew their business from scratch. One thing that I found is that a mentor has value, a lot of value, because they have a lot of wisdom, but oftentimes they're in a place in their business where they don't necessarily remember exactly what it was like to have to be this scrappy. You know, at one point, I think Mike Steinberg wouldn't pay for Post-it notes, but he's past that in his career, and he would come in and say, you need to fix this, this, and this. And I was thinking, if I did all of that work, I'd be out of business because we can't afford the cash. So getting around a group of people that were in similar stages of their business was incredibly useful, or like directly ahead of where I want to be in my business. Like, how did you do that? What was it that made you make that decision? And hearing how they're running their businesses was as valuable, if not more valuable, than the mentorship of some very, very, very successful people.
So, what is your recommendation on finding that caliber of mentor? Speaking for myself, I've not had a mentor. For me, it's been bootstraps, trial and error, but I could have benefited from a mentor. So but not just any mentor. I mean, the mentors that you've mentioned are high caliber mentors. How do you recommend getting into that arena?
So with Doug Shukar, I did his office furniture. So I met him through business, and I was like, wow, this guy really is doing something special. And I said, hey, Doug, I'm really impressed by what you've done. Would you mind meeting with me? And he said, sure. And then with Mike Steinberg, I heard him speak and reached out to him afterwards and said, you know, I really appreciate everything you've done for the community, and someday I'd like to be that helpful, and would you mind meeting with me? When you reach out to successful people, not asking them for something tangible like, hey, I want you to buy all your office furniture from me, but hey, I know you've done something really special, and I want to learn how you did that. I would bet you get an 85% yes rate, 100% yes rate if you're asking the right people.
Yeah, I would say if you've got a target person in your industry or someone that you idolize, ask them. Don't be afraid to. EO actually has an incredible mentorship program. I've had my mentor for 2 years now. There's a bigger organization called YPO. They have people that are making 14 million or more a year in revenue. Most of them are 30, 40, 50 million dollars a year in revenue. It's part of EO. If you want a mentor, you want to be somebody's mentee, you just call the mentor person and say, can you find me somebody in YPO? And that's really the easiest way. But if you've got someone that you would like, just ask them.
I'm sorry, this is just my follow-up.
Yeah.
That I have done, but I get I don't have that kind of time. So I think,
Then you don't want them.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And hence not having it. But yes, to your point, I think that's.
You know, I've had influential people call me to say, will you mentor this person? And so that means that mentee went to that influential person and said, you know, do you know this person? And sometimes they don't know me, but boy, if they're calling me, I'm gonna do this. There's a book out there, a book being written, Arthur Brooks has been talking about a lot, because it's called From Strength to Strength. And the idea in this book, and Arthur's a social scientist, is that when you hit 52 years old, statistically speaking, you're functionally dead as a professional. Whether you're a lawyer, a doctor, Darwin, he published his most influential material, spent the rest of his life publishing, decades, never wrote another thing relevant. And his point is that, and it's like athletes. You're a wide receiver, you're 32 years old, you're done. You can say I'm going to be the exception, but you're done at a professional level. And so his point is that how do you go from strength, which is I am eager, I can learn anything, I can run through a wall, whatever that is, what is my strength in the second half of my life? And just to your point, his point is that you can leverage your wisdom, that most people in the second half of their life find success through leveraging their wisdom, mentorship, / service to others. And that's how a lot of people find success in the second half of their life. So if you do approach someone You know, I can tell you that this is in my, I've been talking about this book for a while now because it's on my mind, like what's next for me. A lot of people are thinking about this. And if you approach someone they may not understand, but we all feel this way. Like, boy, I've been doing this for 30 years now. I want to, you know, it seems wasteful. I don't, you know, I'm bored with this. And so I would keep pushing to find that mentor that's specific to what you're doing or who you are, because yeah.
And who's the author of that?
Arthur Brooks.
For those of you that are close to 50 or over 50, I'm pretty sure Ray Kroc was 50 or older when he bought McDonald's. So it's not always true.
Wasn't Colonel Sanders in his 70s? 80s when he started KFC?
By the way, he's a Kentucky colonel. That's not a military. It's not a military thing.
Yeah.
You guys have done a great job talking about your successes and your peer groups and your mentoring. But many times when you are a startup, you have the great fear of exposing yourself because you either haven't made a lot of money and you're trying to. And the phrase that I was always taught is having enough comfort to opening your kimono, where you are willing to expose yourself, your vulnerabilities, either economically, your success or failures, and how you guys determine when and who you are going to expose yourself to. Because it's very successful, but it's very scary. It needs to be done.
Well, hold on, David. Don't say what you're thinking. Move on to the next thing.
No, I'm not.
always say the second
This will
thing.
be PG, okay?
Sorry.
So yeah, I'm not known for my appropriateness, so that's why Scott's getting on me. The really cool thing about EO, EO specifically, YPO is a little bit different. I was a member of YPO for a period of time, but part of EO is being open and vulnerable. So you join a forum group that's going to be between 8 and 12 entrepreneurs, and some of those might be at 30 million, and some of those might be at 1 million. But everyone has somewhat similar issues. And the key to forum is the top 5% and the bottom 5%. And I've seen people that run billion-dollar companies crying in forum, because running a billion-dollar company means something, but if that company is really running you and you don't have the freedom to enjoy that, that's not a good life, and being able to share that and work on that. So how do you choose? EO forces you, and the more that you do it, the more that you realize you're not alone.
And EO is an entry of over 250,000 annual revenue or over 1 million?
So the EO Accelerator is 250 up to $1 million. EO Accelerator is kind of a feeder system into EO. EO is $1 million or more annual revenue.
And I'm pretty sure, I can't speak for the audience, but I bet you there's more than one of us in here that are below that mark. 100%.
Yeah, so listen, one of the benefits of starting a startup, an early stage company in 2022 instead of 2002 in St. Louis is the infrastructure, is the ecosystem we're functioning in. I mean, there was nothing. This building, ironically, was first rehabbed. It was dormant for decades. It was a law firm, a venture-focused law firm in the 80s, leveraging federal tax credits to rehab this building when there was nothing on the street before it all started. You know, so just an aside, you know, I couldn't get a job there, you know, law school. It's a fancy firm. But my point is, leveraging the ecosystem that we have, Capital Innovators, I-10, I don't even know who's like still around, you know, what's going on in Cortex, CIC, T-Rex, that none of that existed. The local venture funds have seasoned professionals and professional investors, passive investors that are doing that in part because they want to stay connected to the energy of an early stage company. So I feel free to call me, but there are so many avenues of support in our ecosystem that just did not exist. EO being one of them, you know, and even calling us. I mean, we want to help companies get to that space. Dan Lauer is an EO member, early EO member, is running the UMSL Accelerator. There is a lot of, and I guess there's also the pre-accelerator activity, and that's sort of a whole different, smaller category. But I wouldn't, while we're sort of drinking the Kool-Aid with the nonprofit that we run, you know, just feel free to reach out to any one of us if you want to leverage into our networks. We have members that, you know, while it's efficient to mentor the younger or earlier stage EO companies, you know, I could just see a WhatsApp going out. We have a company in this space we met recently, doesn't qualify for EO, but is looking for some mentorship support. The hands will go up. I think you'll find that with most, you know, companies that are later stage, that they don't feel like they don't have the time to support people who are trying to get to the next level.
Yeah, and I want to throw something else out there about that. I mean, early on, you know, all of our companies were below the $250,000 mark as well, right? He could even buy a gallon of gasoline.
How did you afford Starbucks?
Oh, I didn't. I
You just sat there?
Yeah. Everyone else paid for Starbucks.
He's that guy. And so the first game that I published, which really brought me into entrepreneurship, I found a artist online. I wasn't able to pay him, so I told him, and he was a new artist, and he said, I'll go in on this with you. If the game makes money, you can pay me, and if it doesn't make money, you know, we both kind of took the risk together. Launched a Kickstarter campaign. The first Kickstarter campaign, I just wanted to print a couple hundred units. I just wanted to try this thing out. I set my funding goal at like $1,500 or something like that, something crazy low, and it made $12,000. Now, $1,500, is that real money? Yeah, it's real money. $12,000, is that real money? I mean, not compared to where I am now, but compared to where I was then, of course, it was going from nothing and having no product to something. There's also, I'm a business broker, so I'm going to throw this out there. Right now in St. Louis, there are probably 300 to 400 businesses, all doing at least $250,000 in revenue, up to 10, 20, $30 million in revenue, that the SBA would pay 90% of the purchase price for if someone wanted to buy one.
They
Now,
would loan you 90%.
they would loan you. Shh, it's my turn. Now, and I'm not trying to pitch you on, you know, I'm a business broker. I'm incentivized to say those things. But my point is there's lots of options out there. Yes, right now, your business might not be making $250,000 in revenue. And when I joined Accelerator, my business was making, I think, around $330,000 in revenue. And I actually acquired a competing brand with no money down, with no cash. We got very creative on a payment schedule and some equity. And that added 50, 60, 70% to my revenue, my product line, and my bottom line right there, right? So you got to get creative. There's lots of ways.
You can also create your own group. I mean, I've done that several times with people that I knew and respected, and like, hey, why don't we get together as a group and riff off of each other and share whatever, and it's always worked out nicely, and it runs its course. But I mean, the solution is whatever you make.
Any questions, comments?
Could you talk a little bit about your accelerator?
Yeah.
Be happy to.
So there's a couple pillars. First are our business boot camps. These are our learning days. It's an all-day, once a quarter learning day. And there's 4 of them. So there's strategy, execution, cash, and people. Strategy, basically, we help you think about where are you going, and how do you get there, right? How do you build a vision for where you're going and a path to get there? Execution, how do you actually execute on that strategy? How do you put processes and rhythms and systems in place to make sure you achieve what you articulated your strategy and vision is? Cash, a lot of the things that I do, and a lot of the things I talked about earlier were things I learned at Cash Day. How do I move my net 60 terms down to net 15, down to due on receipt? How do I increase my revenue 1%, decrease my cost of goods sold 1%, decrease my expenses by 1%? And for most companies, that 1% plus 1% is actually a 19% increase in your bottom line, right? How do I maximize tools for cash to really keep more cash and earn more cash? And then people, how do you hire? How do you fire? How do you build culture? How do you retain, right? So that's what we focus on the Business Bootcamp days. Now, outside of that, we have an accountability group as well. You meet with this group once a month. There's about 5 or 6 other accelerators in there, and there's a coach. I am a coach for a group of accelerators. That coach is an EO member. It's about 4 hours once a month. And then outside of that, you just tap into learning events, social events, the mentorship program, a WhatsApp channel, and a Slack channel with literally 17,000 something entrepreneurs across the globe you have a network of, and a WhatsApp channel in St. Louis where, I mean, you need a carpenter, you need a dentist, you need someone who does marketing, literally anything, right? I need new t-shirts for, we network and talk about anything we can. Now, the one thing I will say, I don't think we actually said this yet, there's a very, and this is something I love about the organization, there's a very, very strict no solicitation policy. I know that when I come in here, these guys right here and everyone else is never going to try to sell me something, because there's a level of confidentiality and vulnerability, like we were talking about earlier, that we want every member to bring with them and adhere to, and that's not going to work if you're trying to sell your services to everyone all the time, right? And you'll just, when you see a room of EOers, the conversations are just very different, right? No one's trying to sell anything. Everyone's just trying to learn something.
No,
So the accelerator is a membership benefit, it's not something a startup can apply to be part of a cohort.
No, it is a separate thing. It's separate from EO. A lot of the programs are together. I was just going to share that there are a lot of extremely successful entrepreneurs in St. Louis that came out of that accelerator program. I think Matthew Porter graduated accelerator, Brandon Dempsey and Derek Weber graduated accelerator. So these are all the people that are making a significant impact in the community and in the business and philanthropy that came through that program. Did anyone here major in business or finance? Okay, I majored in philosophy, and I actually got a second major in ancient history. So when you go into business and I'm not sure that finance or business will teach you what you need to know to really run a small business. But I came in with no knowledge, and I also thought I was really smart, which is probably the worst thing that you could think when you're starting a business. So the ability to learn from others was much better for me than reading books. I still read a lot of books. In fact, if you guys, that was a real crappy humble brag. If you guys are interested in how to run your business more effectively, one book I'd really recommend is Traction. A lot of us run our business through their operating system called EOS. And it's just a more structured way to run your business that people like me who have ADHD and dyslexic and all of those things would never put that kind of structure in place if we weren't told, hey, do it this way.
And I would just say on that, so 2 of my businesses I run on EOS. The reason why I have 3 businesses is because of EOS. I would have never gotten out of the first one. And now a management team basically manages that company without me. I maybe spend 4 hours a week there. If you are interested in EOS, I would probably suggest reading the book called Get a Grip, which is a narrative version. It's like a story. The Traction is more of a how-to guide and a manual. If you're like, you want to go ahead and implement it, read Traction. You want to hear the story about how it's implemented from a fictitious a narrative, fantastic book, Get a Grip.
Who are the authors?
Gino Wickman. Yes, and he actually is an EOer.
Any other questions or comments? No.
How important of a second business
So we're basically a distribution business, and one of the first things we did was change our terms. So if your order's under $5,000, someone pays 100% upfront. 75% upfront for orders to 15,000, and maybe 60% from 100,000 to 200,000. And if you go to your clients and have a conversation, you'll be amazed at what they'll agree to. They might not agree to what you want, but a lot of times they'll meet you in the middle. Even some of these very large corporations. I remember we sold our first $500,000 job to Wash U, and I was like, well, shoot, now I got to fund this. What am I going to do? And I went to them and I said, can we talk about deposit? And they'd never paid a deposit to us ever before. She said, oh yeah, we're hearing that a lot lately. What do you guys need? I said, I think 50% should do it. And they paid us 50%, and we funded the order through that, and it ended up being a very profitable experience for us. On the backside, leveraging your vendors and saying, you know what, I took this $500,000 order, or I'm about to take this $500,000 order. I'd really like to do business with you, but the client's terms are net 30, and it's going to take us probably 45 days. So, you know, could we get net 45 days on this? And hey, you know, if you're worried about this, I'll sign a you probably don't want to offer this, but you could always sign a personal guarantee on it. But the longer that you can stretch your vendors and the shorter you can have your payment terms with your clients, the better your cash flow is going to be. Also, inventory is a terrible thing when it comes to cash flow. So minimizing your inventory and not bringing stuff in that's going to be long terms. You also, we fired some clients. So if we're earning less than a certain GP, like the salesperson says, oh, this is a $2 million a year account. Yeah, but we're losing money on it. When you factor all of these things, you know, looking at our client concentration and where our profits are, go to your best clients and focus on them, because as a small business, if you're trying to be everything to everyone, you will fail. We have a very limited set of resources, and you have to put that towards the business that is going to net you what you want. And if that's cash flow, look at the customers that have the most profit and the best cash flow.
I'm glad you asked this question, because I wrote down a whole bunch of notes as an answer before this. I love this topic. I mean, so I would say a bunch of things. First, get a line of credit while you don't need it, right? Just be very careful, because a line of credit is like crack. When you need the cash, it's right there to grab it. So just be careful. One thing that we focus a lot on in the Accelerator program is know exactly who your customer is. Why? Because it costs a lot less to acquire them. Stop wasting money on people that are not your ideal customer. If you don't know who your ideal customer is, stop spending money on ads. Figure out who they are first, because it costs a lot less to acquire them. And there's a larger lifetime value to that customer. I talked about optimizing your cash cycles earlier. That was something that we did, like David just said. Almost, I want to say 99% of the time that we've asked customers for deposits, they've said yes. We went from selling to Barnes & Noble at net 90, right? And they can mark it down, and then we have to pay the markdown price on that, to nope, we're not going to sell you our products. We still do sell them a few products, but we've moved to a direct-to-consumer model, and now we're getting all that money up front. And if it's a larger distributor, we have a distributor in Australia, and they publish basically all of our stuff in Australia, print and sell in Australia, and we tell them we want money down up front before we ever ship you product or send you product. And now we're at the point where they will run their own manufacturing runs, and they have to pay for that manufacturing run before anything happens. So we don't float any of that cash anymore. A couple other things real quick. So one thing that was really helpful for us is we started using what's called a waterfall graph. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the waterfall graph. Basically, you graph out your top revenue producing or profitability, or however you want to do it, customers and products. You're going to see that like 20% of your customers are bringing in basically 80% of your revenue, of your profit. The bottom 20%, like David just said, is probably losing you money, right? Fire all those clients, and then focus on those top 20%. And if you don't know who your ideal customer is, that top 20% there, that brings in 80% of your revenue, that's probably your ideal customer right there. And I could say a whole lot more about that, but I'm going to pass it.
Just a
We got our-
quick note on that.
I think we're getting
Be
those.
very careful about your customer concentration, because if any customer makes up more than, let's say, 50% of your revenue, really 30% of your revenue, they own you. And when they come to you and say, your terms are now XYZ, it's going to be very hard to say no.
Okay. We'll stick around for any other questions. I think that's our time. Thanks for coming.